Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are trying something a little bit different. Today's the first day of the On Centerline video podcast. For those of you joining me on YouTube, welcome to the Northwest Aeronaut channel, where we are now airing the On Centerline podcast by me, Sam Terrell, the Northwest Aeronaut. And for those of you who are on YouTube, who have not seen the podcast yet, you can find it on most podcast providers, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And for those of you who are hearing this on a podcast provider and perhaps don't know about the YouTube channel, you can find the YouTube channel at Northwest Aeronaut on YouTube, and I've got a lot of great content here on the channel. At least I hope it's great content. I hope you find it helpful, but I try to focus on flight training and things to help you pass check rides and to just be an overall safe and proficient pilot. So we are trying the video podcast today. And so forgive me if there's any little hiccups along the way. This is kind of an experimental run, but I wanted to try to make this available on both platforms, both YouTube and on the audio podcast as well. So anyway, today what I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about is kind of the basic method that I use to teach students. And this is a method that I teach to my CFI candidates to be able to teach their students. So this is primarily focused towards up-and-coming CFIs or perhaps even current CFIs to try to hopefully help making the delivery of information a little bit easier, both for you as a CFI and also for your students to be able to digest. And this is what I call the what, why, how model. So I've been teaching a lot of CFI candidates this past summer. We've had a lot of great new CFIs come through and pass check rides. And so I want to congratulate all of them. And they will be familiar with this because we hammer it pretty hard throughout training. So the what, why, how model is basically a way to frame any given lesson into those three questions. What is it? Why do we do it? / why is it important? And then how do we do it, or how is it implemented, depending on what the topic is that we're talking about. So we're going to use just a very simple, easy example today. At least I assume, I think it's easy at least, but it's we're going to use slow flight today. Slow flight as an example. And this model, this what, why, how model can actually be used both in the classroom or in the airplane to just be able to quickly and efficiently deliver information in hopefully an easily digestible manner. So, talking about slow flight, we're going to start with the what. What is it? Well, it's slow flight. It's flying slower than usual. All right. Pretty simple what the what is, but it's so often overlooked in delivering, it's kind of like a cover page on a book or something like that, where, if you didn't have the title of the book and you just opened it and started reading it, you wouldn't have any context for what you're about to be getting into. So it's still important to start with that. What is it? We're going to be talking about slow flight today. All right. It sets the stage for your student so that they know what to expect in the next sentence, basically, or going forward in the lesson. Next, we go into the why. Okay. So why is slow flight important? Why is this something we need to be able to not only do and demonstrate on a check ride, but why is this something that we need to be proficient with just as a pilot? So why? Well, slow flight is used in every single flight we do at often the most critical phases of flight, like departure and landing, taking off and landing, right? So we can practice slow flight in both of these configurations, the takeoff configuration or the clean configuration. And we can practice it, of course, in the dirty configuration and the landing configuration with full flaps and gear down if you happen to be in a retractable gear aircraft. So we're going to learn how the aircraft behaves at slower airspeeds, what the controls feel like, the type of responsiveness we get from the aircraft, and kind of segueing into stalls, we're going to kind of learn the characteristics of that aircraft as it does slow down so that we can start identifying those signs of an impending stall so that we can prevent them from happening. So that's kind of the basics of the why we do slow flight and why it's important. And certainly you can expand on that to many degrees. You could also get into the aerodynamics of slow flight. And that brings me to another point too, is there's kind of, I always categorize things into kind of two different types of lessons. We have the theory side of things. Okay, the theory side of a particular maneuver or concept, and then you have the practical side, okay, how it's actually done, why it's done, things like that. It's kind of the actual doing of it versus the behind the scenes, the physics of it, okay? So you have to also decide as the CFI for a given day, for a given lesson, is the lesson you're going to be giving a theoretical lesson? Is it the theory of slow flight, where you're going to be kind of more maybe doing a lecture format versus demonstration performance method type format? Or is it going to be more of a practical lesson? Like, here's the actual steps we take to do slow flight in the plane. Okay, that would be the more of the doing and the practical application of slow flight. Okay, so you got to decide which type of lesson you're going to be giving. And, different students will be more receptive to certain time. I mean, everyone needs to know how to do the doing, right? The theory side of things, some students are really going to be excited about that and really going to latch onto that and get a lot out of it. A lot of students are going to find it overwhelming and possibly boring. So you got to figure out fun ways to kind of introduce the theory side of things into the practical side of things and keep people engaged. So we talk about the why of slow flight, why it's important, why we have to be proficient in it, okay? And then we're going to move on to the how. And again, the how, you can decide, are we going to be teaching the theory side, the physics and the aerodynamics of how slow flight happens, of how a decrease in airspeed requires an increase in angle of attack to create the same amount of lift in order to not lose altitude while we slow down? Or are we just going to be talking about the how from the actual doing of things, the practical side of things? This would be, hey, first we're going to pull the carb heat on. Then we're going to reduce power while maintaining altitude, and then start introducing flaps as necessary. You've probably seen me use this what, why, how format quite often just in my videos when I'm in the plane teaching different maneuvers, even if you didn't really realize that that's kind of what I'm doing. And that's just how I teach students in general, because the idea is hopefully we're laying it out in a nice, simple, digestible format for them to understand what's going on and what's expected of them. Of course, we're going to do ground briefings before we get into the air, so they'll have an idea. But even just kind of showing them as we go along in the air with this what, why, how narrative can hopefully create better understanding on their part. So we just talked about the what, why, how model in regards to slow flight. Let's try to apply it to another maneuver, just kind of so you can see it in action. Let's just talk about steep turns here. So I'm going to just kind of give you a brief lesson using the what, why, how model on steep turns. All right. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about steep turns. Now, what is a steep turn? A steep turn is defined by any bank angle of the aircraft between 45 and 60 degrees of bank. That's how the FAA defines it. And usually I'll go straight to the FAA source for this information so I can show them straight from the official source. So that's what a steep turn is. And why are we going to be learning steep turns? Well, steep turns are important because they teach us the aerodynamics of the aircraft at a steep bank angle. They show us the increase in load factor when we are maintaining altitude at these steeper bank angles. We can observe how stall speed can increase with increased bank angles like this. and it also teaches us to fight and mitigate overbanking tendencies. So how are we going to be doing these steep turns? What we're going to be doing, and of course, as we've discussed before, wink, wink, okay? As we've discussed before, anytime we go into a turn, we need to create more lift because our lift is being divided into the horizontal component of lift and the vertical. We need to create more total lift in order to maintain altitude. When we create more total lift, we are also creating more drag. So as we initially roll into this steep turn, of course, we're going to be using aileron to roll into it. We're going to be using rudder to stay coordinated, but we're also going to be adding just a little bit of power to overcome that increase in drag so we can maintain our airspeed. As we get over to our 45 or 50 degrees of bank, we're going to have to steadily add more and more back pressure. That amount of back pressure that we're adding should be added for the given bank angle you're at any given time. In other words, we don't want to do too much back pressure at once, and we also don't want to wait to add any back pressure until we have the bank in, because then it's just a really abrupt kind of pullback, and you've probably already lost some altitude in the process. So we want to gradually increase that back pressure as we are gradually increasing that bank angle all the way over to our 45, 50 degrees of bank. And once we're there, we're focusing on our sight picture out the window and how our nose cuts through the horizon. As long as our nose stays up on the horizon, we should not change airspeed and we should not change altitude. Once we're in the turn, we need to mitigate those overbanking tendencies by holding just a little bit of opposite aileron from the direction of the turn. And we also won't need quite as much rudder pressure once we're established in the turn as we did when we were actually rolling into the turn. So we're maintaining coordination, we're maintaining the bank angle that we want without allowing it to overbank, and we're keeping just enough back pressure in there to where we kind of feel those G's in our seat and that we're maintaining altitude. When it comes time to roll out from our steep turn, we're going to make sure we lead the rollout enough so that we don't go past our original heading. We're going to lead it by probably about 20 degrees or so. As we roll out, we're doing it slowly and smoothly with rudder coordination. And as we come to wings level, we will reduce that power back to where we had it so that we don't speed up. We will also be sure to hold the nose of the aircraft down, because as we roll out from the steep turn, we are now taking all that horizontal lift that we created and putting it into the vertical axis so that the airplane is going to want to climb if we don't hold that nose down. So that was a real quick demonstration of how I might use the what, why, how model. And again, you can use this for any either flight maneuver or concept, whether it's in the classroom or in the aircraft itself. And it's a great way to just create little bite-size pieces of information, hopefully, so you get the point across in an efficient and digestible manner for your students. Well, that will do it for this episode, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that the video format works out okay. You'll know before I do. And please leave any comments down below if you like these video podcasts or any topics that you'd like me to discuss going forward, or any questions that you'd like me to answer in a future podcast. Again, this podcast is all about you. We want to share your stories. We want to share your kind of struggles and your triumphs and your successes, so that others out there know that they're not alone and that they can get through this journey just like you have. So please share your story, share your questions, and share any topics down below in the comments. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me today, and we will see you next time on Centerline.